Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
I'm Scott Warren. Today we're joined again by Coach David Roche. He set an amazing new record at the Leadville 100-mile race this year. It's a 19-year-old record that was set originally by Matt Carpenter, and it was one of those records that you thought would never fall, but this year it fell. Not only to David Roche's amazing performance, but we're going to get into this. It's also his first 100-mile attempt, which I think is just mind-blowing. But David, if you don't know, he's also won many, many races and been on the podium of many more. He's won the Silver Rush 50-miler just back in July. He's won Quad Dipsy a couple times, Formidable 50K, and also at the Way Too Cool 50K back in 2016, where, as Don likes to recall, Megan Roche dropped a record-breaking course record there in 2016. Tell us a little bit more about that, David. We were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, so what's so cool now that you mentioned Way Too Cool that year is that it was a muddy year, nasty. And, you know,
Right.
I won, but I didn't run a fast time relative to history. Megan won in a course record. And that course record now, 8 years old, is one of the longest standing course records that we're seeing, because Leadville was maybe the longest standing one of these top-notch races. And 19 years old by Matt Carpenter, the ultimate trail running legend, maybe the best of all time. So that's why it was so enticing for me to go to, is that how cool would it be to try to approach one of my heroes? And so it's also cool just to reflect how fast Megan is and how, even though performances are shifting rapidly in the sport, everything's getting faster. No matter how fast the sport gets, Megan is just ahead of the game.
Well, I'm so curious about this performance, David. You know, you've been racing trail races and ultras for many, many years, and 75 plus ultras that you've run. Why in 2024 did you say, you know what? I think I'm gonna approach that 100-mile distance? And I will say, you've been coaching athletes, elite athletes that are running hundreds and beyond for years.
Yeah.
Why did this in 2024 happen to be something that you wanted to do?
So back in January, I was thinking about the year, and I just wanted something that would push me to my limits in training so that I'd be motivated day to day and would have some opportunity to really put myself out there and be vulnerable. Like, my goal this year was to fail. Like, I don't want to go through another year where I have a bunch of solid races that are just like, good, but not like gonna change my trajectory or anything. I want to put myself out there, put my cards on the table, and see what happens. And, in this sport, 100 miles is where it's at. And for me personally, my heart is in Leadville. Like, when I first started running in the 2007 or something, after I quit football, I remember reading about the Leadville 100 via Anton Kripitschka's blog, one of my heroes in the sport. And then I read about Matt Carpenter's course record. And then in Born to Run, Matt Carpenter played such a role in it. And then AJW, Andy Jones Wilkins, talked about this record. And then I fell in love with the trails and the people of Leadville over time. And I even DNF'd the marathon there back in 2008 or something, as I was trying to go up in distance. And, just all of that added together to be like, I think it's time to see what happens at this race that formed such a role in me getting into running, such a role in me getting into trail running. And you know what? If it happens to be chasing that course record, that's pretty cool, because that is maybe the last like historic legendary mark from the previous generation left remaining. And I respect our forebearers so much that, I think the ultimate form of respect is to go try to crush their shit.
Now, did you enter this race, David, thinking, you know what, I'm going after that record? Or did it become something in your mind as you're watching the day roll out, thinking, you know what, this is going real well, I think I'm going to go after it?
Yes, not only did I go for it, I wrote about it online, talked about it publicly in just a very open way that, I try to be as humble as possible. And that's how I am. Like in my own head, I don't think I'm capable of anything. But the coolest thing about sports and ultra running and trail running is that it's a place where you can just be swagtastic. And so, on Instagram, on our podcast, I tried to just say, I think this record's doable. If not by me, by somebody. And I'm going to go for it. And so I went for it. And really interestingly, I made a race spreadsheet. In that race spreadsheet, I did it just for Megan for crewing so that she could get to the aid stations at the right times, approximately. And in that process, I, wrote my times down. And my finishing time came out to 15:27, ahead of the previous course record, 15:42. My actual time came out to 15:26:34. So,
oh man,
it's the spreadsheet of destiny.
David, I can't remember if it was something that was written or it was an interview or something. And we know that you do have good, humble heart. And you were saying that you were joking before the race that this would be a DNF, and where would you DNF? Where would Megan have to pick you up and take you home? I'm just curious. Is that just lip service that you're trying to be funny, or was there in your mind this doubt, or in your mind and in your heart you thought, that's just kind of something I'm going to say in my heart, boy, I am going to give it to this race and I'm going to give it all. And I'm going to finish and I'm going to win it. And there's a really good chance I'm going to break the record.
No, not at all. Actually, I was so doubtful for so long. And thankfully I had Megan there to just not take no for an answer. I initially made that pace chart and the time came out to like 16 hours or something. And she was like, nope, go do it again. And that's the way it's always been with her. And then, we've been through a lot this year. I went through a really bad accident in April, and we went through some stuff just with online trolling that was really nasty. And through that process, I just stopped giving so many fucks. In the old days, I would have stepped up to this and known that, hey, if it's a bad day, well, one, it's going to be hurt and it's going to be hard. Two, I'm going to get all this hate online from the same people that always hate me online, and it's going to affect me. And after all that, especially after the accident, I was just like, you know what? That's not what sports are about. Sports are about shooting your shot, owning it, sharing it with people. And at the end of it, what's going to be waiting for you is love, even if you mess up. So yeah, I was stepping up into the unknown in such a way that I had no idea what I was getting into. I really didn't, even though I've coached a lot of these, and that makes it a little unfair to call me a rookie because I've coached Claire Gallagher, who's crushed Leadville multiple times. And, she's taught me things and she gave me lessons, but, I didn't know what was going to happen, especially because I'm a lower volume training athlete compared to, the athletes of the world that have done these types of records in the past. But with some of the data we had, with where I'm at in my journey, with the 18 years of training I've done, I was like, there's no time for doubt, Fear is not going to get a record. Fear is just going to hold me back. Fear is the mind killer, as they say in Dune. And so I was like, well, what happens if the character I play on race day is fearless? And so that's how I tried to race. Went off the front, within the first few miles in the dark, and decided I wasn't going to look back.
Now, I'm going to ask this question for some of the listeners that are asking it in their own mind. And so I'm going to put it out there. You say lower volume. We've heard of the high volume, people running 100, 120 miles a week. When you say lower volume, what were you able to go and get this course record? What was the volume you were working with?
Yeah. So in the past, like Anton Krupicka, whose blog I'm talking about, he was doing 180, 200 mile weeks and things like that. And I always thought that's what you needed to do. But then I started coaching and saw that, a lot of athletes, it's not practical in their lives, or they just don't respond to it as well. And, we've had athletes have success on podiums of UTMB at lower volume and things like that. And over time, I realized, hey, maybe some of those things that I was thinking are misconceptions. And just the week before the race, Kilian Jornet, who's the best to ever do it, posted his training summary. And, he's doing these really big volumes too, like 25-hour weeks. And I'm like, I can't do that. Am I ready? And so I had a little moment of doubt there. And then Megan fortunately came in. And it ended up working out for me at probably 60 to 75 training miles a week, which is not low volume in the scope of life. Like that's a ton of volume. Like it's a ton of running. at the end of the day. But compared to the others at that level, perhaps it's not that much. Like this type of running that for me, I can finish before work starts, and I'm not doubling, and I'm not it fits in the context of my life. So for me, like the understanding that other athletes have done this before me that we've coached was really helpful, because even knowing that, part of me when I thought there, like, well, what's going to happen when I hit the unknown? Because for me, the unknown comes pretty early in the race. I haven't raced very many longer I've raced a lot of 50Ks, but only a couple 50 milers and one 100K. And I was like, well, only one way to find out.
Hey, so let's talk about that 75 mile as the volume. Let's just call it X. So if X is your number that you hit, how much of that was working in zone 2 or 3, or how much intensity did you have in the 75 miles?
Yeah, so probably 80% would be zone 1 or zone 2. So easy to steady training. Zone 2 is pretty fast for me at this stage. So that's actually kind of stressful on my body when I do like actual zone 2 training. So I do a lot of it in pure zone 1, where my heart rate's very, very low, because that's when I can actually recover and adapt more. Zone 2 starts to take it out of me at this stage of my career and at this age. Then probably 15% in zone 3, zone 4. So that's more threshold, like aerobic still, but starting to push a little bit. And then 3 to 5% in zone 5-ish area, at the more intense end of the spectrum. That mainly coming through strides in a speed workout that's pretty focused each week. So classic intensity distribution. And so also I would bike every week. So I would do 1 day a week of biking where I wouldn't run, and I would take a rest day each week. That's one thing that did change this year, is just a commitment to staying on the bike year round.
I'm curious. We've talked on this podcast, and remind me of the book, Don, where we learned about the Japanese practice of masoji, which was this outrageous. Once a year, you set this outrageous goal, and there's a 50% chance that you're going to fail at it. It's that out there, and it sounds like maybe this was one for you, this masoji. But let's try to take what you learned and help those that are listening to the podcast. Their masoji may be a half marathon.
Yeah.
How did you approach this? You said, okay, I'm going to do this Leadville race, and it's something that I've never done before. I've done 100K, 100K, a bunch of 50 miles.
That did not go well. 100K that did not go well.
You finished.
Yeah, I did, but by the skin of my freaking teeth. That was not a pleasant experience.
So you have that experience that may have some doubt creeping in there, right?
Yeah, no,
I did 100K, but it wasn't what I wanted.
You put the percentages on there, the masojis or whatever. If life depends on it, gun to my head. When I registered for the Leadville 50 miler to race into the Leadville 100. And if you asked me then what the odds were that I would set the Leadville course record, even being a coach and understanding my physiology and not selling myself short, we're talking like, this is what, your life depends on it. I probably would have said under 1%.
Really?
Even believing in myself,
Wow.
If it was odds on the table, we're talking like plus 4,500 odds, plus even more, like that steep, maybe even more than that. And so for me, my masoji was that low, but that's what I wanted, because like when you're faced with this, like the scepter of failure, essentially, of like inevitable failure, for me at least, it's liberating that I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to prove. I'm out here to see what I'm capable of. And, if I'm going to do 100, which is tough on your body, and I'm unsure if I'm going to like it or I'm going to want to continue doing it, I want to shoot a shot that I'll remember. I don't want to try a layup. I don't want to try, this little piddly shot. I want to shoot from half court. And, I think once it got closer, that number went up. It never got above, let's say, 25%. I even at the start line, I don't think it would have been there. But it went up in that process of going up, that was the whole point for me. And the race went great, but like to make yourself go from under 1% to 25%, it's like, dude, I've already won on that start line.
But the thing about that of going out there, you could craft it in a way that's near 100%. I'm just going to go easy, slow, hike, and use all the time allotted to me. Pretty good chance this is going to get done. But running all out from start to finish, that's what brings the number way down to that 1% or to the 50%. It really depends not on the distance, but intensity is key.
Yeah, I mean, we went out, and by we, I mean a number of athletes did this, because I think many athletes were thinking about the course record, as they do every year at Leadville. It's one of the reasons it's so special, at 6 minutes per mile pace, you know, at 10,000 feet elevation. Like it's a different era in ultra running. And, you know, I know my physiology, so I understand how my body was working. I was monitoring my heart rate very closely during the race to get a feel for where I was at. And I was eating so much out there. That I was trying to solve this equation and essentially push the limits of what we understand about human physiology from an educated place. But at the same time, you know, we all have a plan until we get punched in the mouth. And like, I was expecting to get punched in the mouth harder than I ever have before. And it didn't really happen. You know, it kind of just went good the whole day. And there were low points for sure. And there's extra time on the course I missed, but you know, I think it took 18 years of endurance training to get to the point where I could kind of navigate something and have it. Yes, it's new, but I've been in this game long enough that like I've learned from so many people, from Trail Runner Nation, from you know, athletes like Claire Gallagher, that I've just incorporated enough that, you know, eventually you can read a book enough times and learn to cook, apparently.
You know, I want to take a short detour. It's kind of dark on the trail if you're out there running with us right now, and we haven't seen a marker for a while. And there's a right turn. We're going to take this right turn, and we're going to talk about this real quick. For those who don't know about the Leadville 100 trail race, tell us a little bit about it. You're a fan of it. You live, you know, within a couple hour drive of the course start line. Tell us about the course and what makes Leadville 100 so unique.
So it's really easy to describe when to someone that doesn't know it. Yeah, no, actually, I mean, I think it's not pain. It's a really interesting, fun, well-designed course. So it's 37 miles from Leadville to this town called Twin Lakes. And those 37 miles are trail running mixed with some dirt roads. Yes, there's climbing, but this wouldn't be that out of place in California, in the hills of California, that type of terrain. It's beautiful. And then you get to the Hope Pass section, which is from 37 to 62. It's an out and back in that section. And it is the nastiest mountain running you'll see, going up to 12,500 feet, 1,100 feet per mile at times, steep, brutal running. Then you get back to Twin Lakes and repeat the other direction, which is kind of net up. So you have essentially three races in one: a trail race, a mountain race, and a trail race. And because of that, I know it rewards, you know, a bunch of different styles. At the front end, you're going to have to be a fast version of yourself, because there's a lot of miles in there where, yeah, I'm running 6 minute pace. But then you're also going to have to be proficient in the mountains and able to withstand those downhills, because those mountains are brutal. And when I first saw them, like 3 weeks before the race, I was sore for 5 days after just running up and over Hope Pass, after doing just 15 miles of this course. And yes, that knocked my confidence a little bit. But that mix of skills and its location and history, you know, 40-year-old race that really, along with Western states, jump-started this sport's existence in the entire world. And then it comes on in this prominence in the book Born to Run, where it's talked about as one of the main pieces. You put it all together and it's like, all right, there's not many times in life where you can be like, you know, a baseball player competing at Yankee Stadium. And to me, you know, if I were a baseball fan, even though I fucking hate the Yankees, I would think that was really cool. But here, I get to compete at our version of that as a humongous fan of the sport who feels so much awe and respect for the people that came before me. So it was just like, everything about it gave me chills to think about. Like, there's so many times I was running and I would imagine walking out onto that field, to continue that metaphor. And I would just shudder with a chill. And, that to me is why to do 100, is because you can get this feeling, this feeling of transcendence before you even get to the start line, at the awe-inspiring immensity of it all.
Isn't it amazing? It's more than just a foot race. the sport that we're in. I do want to add one thing that you failed to mention, David, about the course. The average altitude's like 10,000, 11,000 feet.
Yeah.
So it's at altitude. You don't live, well, I guess you could say you live at altitude. You live at a mile above sea level, which is what, 5,000 feet, 4,500 feet. But you start at 10,000. So you have that to contend with too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cool race. Now we found that we were lost on that trail going out right. We've made it back to the original trail. We've seen a trail marker, and we can continue down the path that we were going.
Oh my gosh, that was my nightmare all race. When I realized I was on one and it was a good day, I was thinking back to Jim Walmsley in 2016 at Western States, and I was like, man, I don't want to take a wrong turn right now. That would be unfortunate. So that was a good analogy.
So I did not follow the race like many did. I do know that when the gun went off, you took off the starting line and led out of the starting gate and led the entire race. Was that the original plan, to do hey, let's shoot our shot early and see how things go?
So no, I actually wanted to run with people, especially it starts at 4 a.m. in the dark and then eventually goes to trails that are rocky. And I don't have night running experience. As a coach, even, I'm just like, headlamps are good. You don't need to practice. And so I was running with JP Giblin, who won last year and is an amazing athlete. And at mile 4 or so, it goes up a steep, rocky climb. At the top of the climb, he stops to just pee off and go to the bathroom, just like we all have to pee eventually. And so I'm left in the dark running on this trail, and I'm just kind of like, all right, I guess now I'm committed, because I was planning on being like, what's the point of going ahead in the dark? Kind of want to stay with people, all that. And so then I was like, well, now it's time to go, mile 4, but hundreds start early nowadays when you're going for these records. Like the start line, the race starts at the start line and every minute counts. And so, from there on out, I was like, every single second I could find in the course, I was going to grab, whether that was, taking a leap off a rock that maybe they would say you shouldn't take in 100, or running every uphill. So I tried to run every step of the race, or not taking any time in aid stations other than the time it took to have gels stuffed in my belt. Like, the tone was set early that, look, if every second counts, tons of the best athletes ever have gone for this record and have not got it. And not only haven't gotten it, have faded to 10 hours later, just trying to gut out finishes. If that's the case, I can't ignore history. This is going to be hard. And in that context, like I said, you just kind of got to put your chips on the table. And I was hot committed. It was all in the center.
Anytime during that race, did you start to hear some footsteps or see some headlamps behind you, thinking, you know what, these guys are breathing down my neck, I got to keep going?
No, I mean, I did never saw anybody whole race. And later on in the race, I was definitely getting updates on the course. It's kind of like, if you watch basketball or something and they go look up at their replay monitor to see things. Nowadays, everything has such great tracking and live monitoring. So Megan was able to communicate to me what was happening in the race, which was helpful because Adrian McDonald in particular, 2-time winner at Leadville, I knew was like going to be chasing, and I was scared of him. He's very good. And so I was definitely motivated by that, because I'm like, I respect this guy so much and I need to be prepared for what happens when he comes up behind me. But in retrospect, that was me just, creating ghosts to run away from.
By the sounds of it, you used that to your advantage, not knowing exactly where they were and assuming at some point somebody was going to come up. And so you didn't lose a second. You took advantage of everything you could to stay in front.
Well, that and then understanding that, like, you know, saying a course record is a goal is just such an audacious thing to do when it's Matt Carpenter. I mean, this guy did not do that many ultras, but in mountain racing, he's the best ever to do it. He has one of the highest VO2 maxes ever recorded across all sports, 94 for those that know, so much higher than me. So objectively, he is a better runner than I am. And that knowledge led to me to be like, just because he's better than me doesn't mean he's going to finish in front of me, because it's 20 years later. The science has come so far in terms of everything that we know about training theory, nutrition, all of that stuff. But I would be idiotic not to think that this athlete, who's one of the best that's ever lived, is someone that I can take lightly. So for me, it was more like understanding this record hasn't been broken for a reason, and I need every ounce of help I can get out there. And so trying to seize that moment from the gun, because, a minute gained at mile 7 is worth just as much as a minute gained at mile 93 when you're talking about history.
David, you mentioned you were going into this with a plan, but also expecting to get hit in the face and having that plan. Did you ever get punched?
Yes.
Let's talk about the punches.
Yeah. So a few times. And I would say the main piece of adversity was around mile 80. So there's this climb at Leadville called Power Lines. It's really steep coming up the backside. And by that point, I had been pushing this nutrition strategy that was pushing the limits of what humans can do. And maybe
what was the strategy? Let's spell that out here.
Probably, so all gels and sports drink.
Wow.
And probably 500 to 550 calories per hour the entire time. So essentially gel every 20 minutes, all my fluids being sports drink and electrolytes. So, that's a lot to put in your stomach, obviously. And I've practiced all of this, and, it's something that's driving endurance performance in general across sports. But, when you've taken in that much, your body at a certain point is trying to do so many things at once, and it can be quite difficult. So at mile 80 on Power Lines, we get near the top of the climb, and it's at high altitude again. And I stopped for a second because I had this rule that I wouldn't walk, but I'm allowed to stop. So there's people up there, locals, who had set up a cheering station. So I stopped and gave this big, guy with a beard, a hug. Looked a lot like Scott. And, just to thank them for being there. And as I did that, I almost passed out. Wow. And I think that is a normal thing that people feel in hundreds, but it combines with I consumed so much, and I'm starting to worry a little bit, is my stomach going to turn, and all of this, that it was just one of those moments of we still have 20 miles to go. People have tried this before and failed, and almost all of those failures happen in the last 40 miles. Is this my failure? And so my pacer, Teddy, who's Teddy Bross, absolutely brilliant doctor, kindest guy you could ever know, just was like, get down in altitude. And so I was able to run down, and then sure enough, it went away. And after that, I was able to get through. And then what it became after that is a much funnier type of adversity, which is dealing with the burps from consuming all that. So my big concern was, I'm not an athlete at this stage that could puke and rally and have that type of day. So every time I burped, I would need to slow down for 20 steps to let that burp pass and be very controlled with it. So that was a funnier version of the same thing, of being like, all right, my race could end at any minute, and it could end in such an abrupt way that I need to start controlling for eventualities. And that's the one time that, I started to maybe back off the gas pedal a little, because I was just like, now we get to Leadville. Now we go celebrate, some history with some champagne, and I can vomit 10 minutes after the finish, which I did.
So you went out at a 6-minute mile pace, you said, and coming back, there's a net up as you're coming back, correct? What was your coming back pace? How did that look compared to your going out pace?
Oh, so much slower, which was the theory. My theory with ultras is that the best way to race them is not to like negative split, like to go faster at the end or whatever, or even split, the best way to race them is to fade, but fade in a controlled way where the fade isn't like breaking down. So for me at the time, I mean, like we were running some 8-minute miles in there.
Wow.
But on equivalent terrain, like, so like there was a slight down that was like the slight down at the start. That 6-minute mile probably would have been the 7:15. And on a slight up, we're like the uphill started to slow you down way more at that stage. But I'm still jogging them. That's my thing. Like I'm not saying everyone should jog uphills. I am saying everyone should try to jog just maybe a few more uphills. But for me personally, like it helped a lot to just key into that.
Did you jog the Hope's Pass, or
Sorry. Leo? I'm just for the recording. I don't want his cry to come through the mic. I'm just gonna like say something.
Oh, no problem.
I think they realized it. Sorry about that.
Yeah. What was my question?
About Hope Pass.
Yeah, pass. Yeah. You said, walking. What your simple rule was: no walking allowed, but you can stop and stand. So that's your rule. Hope's Pass isn't something that you necessarily take an easy jog up.
Yeah.
Did you?
I jogged it. Something I've worked on for a long time, and those that have listened to our podcast know we call it Team Never Hike. It doesn't mean never hike. It just means that if everyone can find 1% more to jog, even if it's the same pace as hiking, eventually that adds up, because it's not about what you perform on the day. It's about how you can then adapt over time. So 2 years from then, you might be running 20% more without any change in performance. So essentially a way to gain fitness. But on Hope Pass, for example, the rule itself became instrumental to me, because just having it, even though my running was at hiking pace, really helped anchor me in the like, all right, we're racing, we are not slowing down. And then my body didn't have to shift gears in muscle recruitment, so that as soon as we started going down or on a flat, I was able to just lock back into what I was doing. And what's fascinating is Matt Carpenter from 2005 was so far ahead of his time and actually wrote an entire training manifesto on his event. I didn't see it till after the race, but since then it's gone super viral, because people are like, wow, a 2005 document that is just like so far ahead of its time. This is crazy. It's like finding a scroll that has instructions on how to build an Apple iPhone. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But in there, interestingly, he said that he did not walk a single step of the course either. So it could be one of those things that on this particular course is rewarded at this end of the pack in ways that we don't understand. Or maybe what we're seeing is that it's a little piece of wisdom lost to history from Matt for some of the elite male athletes about like, hey, maybe there's something to this. But, either way, for me, it was more of a, I think, psychological thing, that it was empowering. And I knew that if I could keep running uphills, I could compete with history.
Would you recommend that never hike to a mid-pack runner?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's not never hiking for them. For them, it's, and chasing the cutoffs. The way it is like, if you can run just a little bit more on all of your runs, oh my gosh, it adds up over time. Like, the fitness ramifications are huge. And so, we've gotten to coach athletes that are chasing cutoffs, but then most importantly, through our podcast and our Patreon, we've gotten to interact with so many people asking questions. And the number of times, we're talking thousands of messages from people saying, I never thought that was for me. And then I tried to do it, and it felt ridiculous because I was jogging beside my friend who was walking. But then I went to this 100-miler and I beat my time by 8 hours.
Wow.
So, there's different strokes for different folks, but I do think that there's something that, like, hiking itself is good and needed, but it alone is not driving performance. And if we're thinking about long-term growth, there's a little bit more out there from just betting on yourself and being okay going a little bit harder because you're learning this skill. And so, that's what I wanted to apply out there, because, hey, I'm stepping into the unknown, and there are people out there that are way better at 100-milers than me and have way more experience. And in that context, where do my advantages lie? It's like, well, maybe my advantage lies in that I still think like a 5K runner,
Yeah.
Well, David, there's nobody better than you at Leadville. I mean, I can say that.
Now we can say that. On Saturday morning at 3:48 a.m., as I was preparing to start, I would not have said that. I was, taking a piss in a back alley there, questioning whether I was ready. So I learned along with the rest of the world.
Well, those of you who are playing the Golden Nugget Bingo, you can mark that middle space, because just doing a little bit better, running just a little bit more, I think that's what I'm going to take away on my bingo card as a Golden Nugget.
It applies to training too. Like, I think that sometimes athletes at the back of the pack end up getting in such a habit of selling themselves short because that's what the world tells them. That, like all the training advice that's geared towards them is essentially saying, well, you're not supposed to think of yourself like an elite athlete. And I'm like, you are an elite athlete. Let's try to optimize your performance in the same way that I tried to optimize mine over so many years. And, I think what's cool about, what happened with me is like, yeah, probably if we polled the experts in the trail running community, we'd be looking at that 1% number that, I mean, maybe a little higher than that. I'm not sure of the exact number, but it wouldn't be high of people that said I would get the course record. But if you bet on yourself in those little ways and keep treating yourself that way, who knows, who knows what you're capable of. So, I think that open question is why this sport and sports in general are so beautiful. It's like, you don't know what you're capable of until you show up every day for a really long time. And that sometimes overnight success stories are actually 20 years in the making.
Right. Right. Speaking of not knowing what you're capable of, I want to go back to this nutrition plan.
Yeah.
David, oh my gosh. I can't run for 3 or 4 hours and just take gels. I start just by ripping the foil packet open, I'm starting to dry heave. I just cannot do it. How were you able to put that many gels down your throat with only having vomit burps coming up?
Okay, so this is a place where the science has rapidly shifted. I mean, the 120 grams per hour, so 120 grams of carbohydrates, we're talking 480 calories, has been studied now for a couple years, and it works. And where it's really been exemplified is in cycling. So the professional cycling peloton is fascinating because it's the biggest uncontrolled experiment we have of the best athletes in the world pushing themselves where 0.1% matters. In ultra running, I was told on Instagram that I beat his time by 1.6%, Matt Carpenter's. We're not talking 0.1%. A lot of variables matter. So in that sport, fueling is just, everyone is doing those types of fueling rates. But the problem, and we're talking 120 grams, but the problem becomes what happens when you're running and having the jarring and all that.
Right.
And so I figured out a few methods that help me out. The first one is called slurping. So it's what I call it. So
get your pads and your pins out, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. We're going to learn how to down 120 grams of gels for 15 and a half hours.
I'm convinced anyone can do it. And it comes from the slurp. So nowadays they have gels that are based in liquid consistency. I could never, ever, ever dream of doing this with a traditional goo gel. Like, I would vomit instantly. And so with these liquid gels, what I do, open them and then squirt them past my palate. So I'm not getting the potential rejection response that we all are aware of that can happen in these sports. And as a result, I don't really taste anything. It's like taking a shot or something, or taking a drink. And that slurping method was game changing because I could take gels even when my stomach was starting to turn, as it all, like at this altitude, everybody's stomach turns, all the way up until the finish line. My last gel was a couple miles to go. And that method meant a lot. But the other problem that I found, and this is a place where before this race, I had so many little tidbits that I wanted to share, but I couldn't because I was worried that if I did, people would say it was crazy. But I'm inspired by competitive eater training. So how they train their stomachs to hold this much quantity. And the way they do it is, some of them do it with watermelon. I don't do that. They do it with liquid. So what I'll do is just very simply on a run, let's say I hit a water fountain at the halfway point here in Boulder, I might have 35 ounces of fluid all at once. So, at first that obviously you may feel bloated, feel nasty, but the cell turnover in the gut has a substantial amount of like memory and ability to adapt to these things. And over time, like, I could drink all that and be fine, and it didn't bother me. And so basically we're saying slurping and learning from competitive eaters at Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
Joey Chestnut, look out. David Roche is coming for your record.
I remember reading about Kobayashi at the same time that I read about Leadville back in the day. I never thought the two would come together.
All right, David, I have 3 questions for you. And I say that so Scott sits back and lets me get all 3 of them in. The first one is, what did you learn about the 100-mile distance? This is the first time you've run it, and you're a veteran ultra runner. What did you learn walking away from this that you didn't know going into it?
So I'm going to go 2 psychological points. The first was told to me by Clara Gallagher before the race, who I coach, one of my best friends, has won Leadville twice. And she said, keep your energy for yourself when it's time. And so anyone who's ever seen me in a race, hopefully I've been incredibly kind to them, told them some very great things about themselves that are well earned. But in this race, after Twin Lakes on the return, or even a little before, even like at mile 50, I decided, all right, it's time to go inward. And I did that for the first time. And I think it gave me a reserve of power just to be focused that was required in 100 miles. And that was really important to me. Number 2, this actually happened before the start. And this is a place where I'm not a rookie because I've gotten to learn from the best. And this comes from Courtney DeWalter. I don't coach Courtney, but I'm her biggest fan. And the way she's talked about the pain cave is really important to me because a good example is the U.S. women's national soccer team. Their new coach, Emma Hayes, showed the team a video of Courtney DeWalter before the semifinals to tell them about the pain cave, these soccer players, saying, this is the type of thing you need to get comfortable with. And what she meant by that is not that, hey, this sucks and it's hard, but it's rewarding in the end. It's like, no, actually, the pain cave is the point. And the day before the race, I really sat down with that idea that, like, I'm not here to win. I'm not here to set a course record. I'm not even here to finish. I'm here to enter this state that I can only get tomorrow by my own volition. You know, I had this terrible accident in April. Everything was taken away from me with agency. And that pain I experienced then, like, was fresh in my brain. And I wanted to reclaim pain for myself. And I think that that's the magic of hundreds, is that no matter how it goes, you're going to feel, quote, pain, which can mean a bunch of different things out there in various ways, whether it's GI system or just getting tired of the distance or adversity or just getting down on yourself, whatever it is. And for me, I was so damn excited to step into that cave, with the tools that people like Courtney have given me. And so when I got into that cave, I found that the cave, I looked up on the walls and there was like, tie-dye, and there were confetti falling from it. And I was like, hey, it's a pretty sweet pain cave. I like it. Let's make a home here.
Is that pain cave different than your 50-mile or 50K pain cave?
Oh yeah, totally different, because you kind of just have to get to peace with just continuing to move indefinitely. But when I finished the race, I was like, oh, I could have gone 170 miles at this point, because for me, it took a while to get to that pain cave. But when I did, you kind of just lock into this, all right, and now I'm moving in this manner type approach. And I actually didn't gain any more time after mile 87. I was 30 minutes up on second place, finished 30 minutes up on second place, was the same amount up on the course record, maybe 30 seconds gain. And the point being that once I entered the pain cave, it was no longer about pushing. It was just about being. And, I got very comfortable in that state. And yeah, maybe in retrospect, if you put that same feeling into my body right now, sitting here comfortable in this chair, I wouldn't like it. But in the moment, one of the most cool and uplifting things I've ever felt.
You've just settled into it. You accepted it. You trusted it wasn't going to take you out and destroy you, that you would live through it, and you just dealt with it.
Yeah. And that, pain is human. It is exemplified in our impermanence, in everything we all share. So by letting myself accept myself in that moment and accept the feelings, I'm also hopefully like sharing this experience with everyone out there in the world who feels the same exact thing. So for me, it was one of those transcendent moments of feeling connected via the universe. Like, oh, this is the point. This is the only reason 100 milers make sense when you think about them intellectually, is specifically because it pushes you to a transcendent place where you're connected on a deeper level, not just with yourself, but with other people with the universe, with all of this entropy that we're all facing. And so, in the pain cave, you're seeing the same shit stars are made of. And I don't get to experience that much in life, and so for me, entering that was so wholly unique and something that I'll never forget.
As you're talking about that, I'm reminded we're doing a podcast series on this book. Have you read this book yet?
Ryan Holiday is one of my favorite thinkers. I love him.
The obstacle is the way, and that's exactly what you're saying. When you entered the pain cave, you recognize that this is not an obstacle that's going to take me out. This is the obstacle that's going to get me there.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Holiday, it's obvious in retrospect reading his work that he's a runner, right? Like it's so clear to me, and I love the guy. I never met him, or he probably doesn't even know who I am, but the way he frames Stoic philosophy, I think, is essentially just tapping into a truth that all spiritual systems are trying to tap into at their core. And to me, that's so cool that, like, basically what the Stoics are saying is like to accept these things that we cannot control, and in the process to uplift others and all of that. And you see the same principles in Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam and all of that. And at its core, to me, like, the reason that hundreds can be spiritual is purely because it strips down all artifice. Someone like me who tells others they are amazing is now staring inward and not making eye contact with anybody. Everything is stripped down. You are stripped down to your core. And what happens when the artifice is removed is you're actually connected to, like, a more universal truth about existence. And so I think the requirement, the prerequisite to feel that and to truly understand what the pain cave means, though, is to accept it. And for me, that has to happen before the start line. And so I was looking forward to it all day. So when it hit, when I was almost passing out, I was like, all right, I'm going to troubleshoot this. But at the same time, hell yes.
You embraced it. You embraced that moment. I've said in the past, if you really want to get to know yourself, who you really are and what you're made of, do something very, very hard. Yeah. And you'll get that chance to get to know who you are.
No, for sure. I mean, I think the first time I ever truly understood who I was during 2-a-days in football. The amount
Absolutely.
I just remember growing up, going from 14 years old to a wise soul through that. And it's cliche, but like, how many opportunities do we get that when we're not kids anymore? I think a reason a lot of people get calcified in things is that they lose those opportunities just because that's life. We just go through the motions. I think one reason that people gravitate towards ultra running and endurance sports is because it shocks you out of that. And that's, to me, where the beauty comes from, is that, like, everything that we experience online, all of it is fake. It's all in a mirage. Everything we experience on the trails, when we do enter that dark place, that's all real. And it's real in a way that we might only experience a few times in our lives.
And we do it by choice, because you can bounce out of a race anytime you want and sit down on a rock and say, I'm done. So it's done by choice. And very few people get a chance to put themselves into a state like that by choice. Sometimes it's thrust upon you, like you had absolutely no control of it, and here you are, and people are doing things harder than running 100 miles. But in this case, you get a chance to take a glimpse inside of hardship. And I've said also in the past that genetically, we were designed to survive hardship. Most chaos could happen to our ancestors that have come before us. The reason we're standing here today is they had the resilience and the determination to get through it. And that's the only reason we're here. And that means we have the same capacity to do the same thing and pass it on and pay it forward.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, I think that the volitional nature of it is important, because pain for its own sake is not a good thing. Like, I mean, we're not designed, I think, to chase it out in a specific way when it's like thrust upon us. Like, I don't think it's the same spiritual experience. And I say that firsthand. On a bike ride in April, I was just riding straight down the road. Car did not see me, turned left into me at 25 miles an hour when I was going 25 miles an hour, and I was launched 100 feet. And, I came out of that. I was lucky I survived. I had a severe head injury and, broken bones and lacerations. And it was a very tough couple months because, the after effects of those types of head injuries are not great all the time, especially when you you're just dealing with shit and it's just very hard. And that's what led me to the place, though, at the start line where I was so excited to take control of that feeling, because I didn't get any transcendence from getting hit by a car. Like, for me, it just made me realize I don't want to be hit by cars. And yes, it definitely, it gave me gratitude for sure. Like, that was awesome. Like, the gratitude to be alive was there. But at the flip side, like, my mental health was suffering because my brain just wasn't operating like it should. And it was just hard for a long time. And I was like, what is this race other than my chance to reclaim that? And what I found out there was like, it's just so different that, the sport is just amazing because you can tap in to like an understanding that, yes, is shared with our ancestors. I imagine it's not that dissimilar from psychedelics or something for some people, where you're tapping into a truth deeper than yourself. And to be able to do that myself, to give that to myself, I was like, oh my God, I'm the luckiest human alive. So, the course record was so fun to chase because it structured the days and weeks and months before. But when I was out there, I just wanted that sweet pancake, baby.
and you speak of hallucinogenics, and there's that mechanism or a chemical could come into our brain and allow us to move into a different space spiritually, or just imagining things and seeing things that may or may not be there. The same thing that can happen out on a run when you're hallucinating. Your body's trying to protect itself. So all those chemical mediators and receptors that are around are there for a purpose. So when we end up in that crisis time, when there's not enough calories, when you're cold, when there's a lot of miles ahead of you, when your feet hurt, your body is trying to remove you, and it's using all of its tools that it can, and it calls upon those same receptors that may have been present when somebody's on a hallucinogenic journey. It's happening to you in real time. Your body has that in place. And I imagine that it can not only do it during these struggles, but maybe during the time of our last breaths. Our body probably lets us down gently and gives us a permission to glide into wherever our final destination is, and it's very kind to us.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
Totally agree. I mean, tons of stories like that. I think essentially it's just what happens when artifice is stripped away, and sports do that. I think at times, especially this sport, death does that. Hallucinogenics seem to do that. Spirituality does that for some people. But all of those things, and extreme presence can do that too. Like a climber might experience that. But all those things are essentially just like you can spend 100 years here and not really live much. And I know I'm subject to that sometimes. Like, I'll be really caught up in what's on Twitter and not really know what's going on with myself. I'm totally susceptible to that. But you know what draws me out of it? Something purely viscerally physical like this. And so for me, it was like, hell yeah. I mean, and that's the reason I love coaching. It's like, you're getting to not just think about this, like, I don't mean in a specific way of like feeling the pain cave, but that what happens when you optimize what a human can do, like, and sometimes those humans are at the back of the pack, just chasing cutoff. That's still so cool. Like, you're pushing the very limits of what makes us actually bones and gristle creatures. And then what was so cool for me at Leadville is, people had called this the unbreakable record, but I have a theory that humans are capable of something more. And I really wanted to explore it. So, for me, getting to be a part of that was really cool. And I think the record's going to go down again, and people are capable of way more. But I think one thing that some took away is that all those people that might have bet against me, which again, I would have bet against me. So same page, same team, all those people that would have bet against me, I hope some of them realize that, hey, maybe if we think a little bit at what happens at the margins and bet on ourselves and all this psychological stuff too, humans are capable of way more than we even know right now. And ultra marathons are a wonderful window into that capability and what might happen at the step beyond the edge.
And you don't have to win a race to be a winner in the race, right?
1,000%.
You go out after something hard and you put a plan together, you execute well, and you get it done. You're as big a winner as the guy or gal that came in through the tape in the end. You did it, and to celebrate. And I've even said, I know you're ready to talk. And I've even said, maybe the best race run isn't by the first place person, but maybe the person towards the back of the pack is having their best race. They put it together. They ran to their potential, even better than the person that won the race. Some of the winner of the race may be somebody in the mid pack or towards the back.
Yeah, 1,000%. But I mean, I didn't go a step further to be extra philosophical.
Yes.
Like, best winner is sometimes the person that DNFs. Like, this happened today and, this week. And yes, it's triumphant. Yes, like, the New York Times is calling, etc. But this was solely rested on so many failures, many of them very public, where things did not go well. I'm not sure the exact number of DNFs I have. I assume it's in the double digits, probably 15 DNFs or something over time for various reasons. And like anything that happened, like the New York Times doesn't realize this, I think, when they call, but they're not calling about Leadville. They're only because of Leadville. They're calling because I've DNF'd 15 times. And it's kind of cliche to be like, oh, failure is the path, but like it is. Like, the obstacle is the way. And for me, like I look back and I'm like, God bless that broken road, because that accident, I mean, the race wouldn't have happened. Clearly, I would not have been in the place to be this excited about, the philosophy of the pain cave. Like that's just not where I was yet in my journey. That's why I hadn't done a 100-miler. But similarly, like all of those failures I've had in my running journey formed the basis for, having the day that might go down in history, at least for a couple years. And so, to anyone out there, I'm just like, it's hard, right? Like you got to feel your feelings, but what comes out the other end, as long as it still, you're still able to bet on yourself. Hopefully what you learn is that you're enough no matter what. And if you do that, you can then become the person with nothing to lose. And everyone should fear what the person with nothing to lose is capable of.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you pulled some of those 15 DNF, if 15 is a real number, some of those lessons from those 15 DNFs that propelled you to victory?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everything, it's all either have a bad day or, let's frame it this way. You either have a good day and you'll learn a little bit, or you have a bad day and you'll learn a lot. And my personal coaching, how I've coached athletes, how I've experienced the sport is because I've gotten to learn a ton and then iterate off those experiences of learning. And so how I experience the sport is almost solely through the bad experiences. That's what motivates me to change things, to try different approaches at the margins. And then eventually I find different approaches that work for me. But the only way I personally get knocked out of the groove I'm in and to try something new is to be forcibly knocked out of it. Like it's never doing it proactively almost, unless like a research study comes out that's just unequivocal, or I read about, Tom Evans's fueling strategy at Western States. And I'm like, all right, this is clearly the way I've got to go. Or I read about sodium bicarbonate and how it's being used in Olympic training on the track and understanding the parallels. But mostly though, it all just comes from fucking up. Sorry, from screwing up. If we want to edit that out, you get the idea.
And so I announced that I had 3 questions, and I'm going to number 2.
You already asked 2. I've been keeping track. You've already asked 2. You only have 1 left.
Ryan, how many questions have I had? I announced, I think one, and then you guys took it on another direction. What have your clients taught you? You'd never run a 100-mile race yet. But you have coached plenty of people towards their personal best in a 100-mile. What did you bring away from your coaching experience?
I think the main thing there is that lots of different approaches work for different people, and you don't have to get bogged down in what others are doing. Understand your physiology, understand what works for you, and you can excel. So for me, like I was thinking about Claire out there. I was thinking about Drew Holman out there. These athletes who I've trained with, who have told me for years that, like, David, if the world just sees what you can do. And then, I've been thinking that, like, look, these people believe in me so much. I've got to have the courage to believe in myself. I've got to. I owe it to them. And Megan, most of all, being at the front end of that, as someone who's bet on me for 14 straight years now. And it was our 10-year wedding anniversary on the day of the freaking race.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
And she showed up pregnant. to like chase me around Leadville at 10,000 feet. Like, all of that comes together to be like, all right, different things work for different people. I have all of these people that have shown they believe in me. And what happens if I have the courage to just give myself an ounce of that belief? So that was what I was channeling all day. And throughout the race, my brain was free associating with different athletes who I've gone to coach, with Claire, with Drew, with Katie Asmuth, and seeing how she's raced, with Becca Wendell, with so many of these people who, kind of lit the way for me.
Well, I'm gonna flip that on its head too, David, because you're a great example of this too. Make sure that you're the one that is expecting more of the people around you and are cheering the people around you and saying you're better than what you may think you are. And I think that's what makes you such a great coach, is because you do that for other athletes. And so in this case, it was good for you to feel that in the reverse direction and accept it rather than dismiss it.
Well, I mean, I think one of the most, Ted Lasso is such a beautiful show in this regard, because like it starts out in the first season and you're just like, oh, this is a story about a happy coach who lifts other people up. And then by end of season 3, it becomes about like depression and anxiety. Right. I loved it because I was like, oh, they get it. They get it. They see where that spark comes from in the first place. And I think some of the criticism, some of the people that root against me might say that it's a simplistic worldview that I present into the world. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm thinking about death and anxiety and all that good stuff. And I try to come to the conclusion that, you know what people need? They need someone who fucking loves them. And they love them for them and unconditionally. Because I know that's what I need. And I'm fortunate to have it. And not everybody does. And so if I can help one person, it's worth, 15 comments about whatever bullshit you see online.
That's why in many cases these 100-milers are not done as an individual. They're done with pacers, they're done with crew. Oh, because you need to have that support system. Absolutely. David, thank you so much.
Oh, Scott, 3 of 3.
It's number 2.
You can't cut me off. That was only 2 questions.
I'm going to rewind this, and I'm going to show you that you've already asked 3 questions, but I'll give you 4. Go ahead, Freeman.
We'll let the listeners decide.
I know you have more of it, more in you. So go ahead. 4.
David, I'm going to ask this question to you. The listeners don't have to listen. This is right here between you and me. What did you learn about yourself on this first 100-mile run that you now have the course record in Leadville? What did you learn about you?
Well, one, just from a pure, direct way, it's like, oh, guess I'm pretty good at this. Because I doubt myself so much.
Congrats.
Thank you. I have doubted myself so much for so long. And, I hate to come back to criticism because there's not that many people that criticize me. In the big scheme of things, it's 99% love. But that 1% is vocal, and a lot of our listeners know all about it. And one thing that a lot of people have been saying is, everyone was saying before, over the years, that how could David coach 100s when he's never run one? Well, what are they saying now? Or whatever. And I'm like, I wasn't even aware of that criticism. I was aware of other criticism.
That was the graffiti that was written on that pain cave wall, David.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware of that. But that does feel good from just this is my life, not running myself, not being an athlete, but being a coach. And so that feels good. But then the other biggest thing I learned is that, when the going gets tough, I'm a tough MFer. I, went through that accident, and you can probably tell that, this is the first time I've done TRN since that accident. I'm a little bit different person since then. It made me understand to a certain extent that some of the ways I've been moving through the world was based out of fear, and I'm done with it. I'm done caring about what people think. I'm done investing myself in the narratives that others put upon me. And after that accident, though, I have this little nose scar you can see that was a really bad thing. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. It'll be a cool story one day. But what I thought is, as I was sitting there trying to recover, that with that nose scar, what I hope people see, I hope they see a smiling face when they see it. I hope they see a face of someone that's telling them they're awesome. And I hope they realize that do not mistake that kindness for weakness. That is a tough MFer behind that smile. And, hundreds, it's really cool. It's a chance to explore that. And I would have been a tough MFer if I had DNF'd at mile 30 for a different, you know what I mean? Like I would have given my all for that. And that's amazing. But getting to do it in such a way that was then able to finish with champagne sprays and tears and hugging and kissing Megan and my baby Leo and my parents. And then the community, like 5 deep, as far as the eye could see, cheering on, like thousands and thousands of people, and feeling all the love after, also feeling like there had been like a weight on my shoulders since that crash, was just a reminder for myself that like what's waiting for you on the other side is love. And at the end of the day, all of this narrative I had about wanting to express toughness and all of that, the most important thing and the most tough thing we can all do is just give and receive love. So, at the end of the finish line, I was just left with this massive feeling of love. And it's what I hope to carry through the rest of my life. Is just understanding that this sport is silly. Like most of the things we do in life are silly. What's not silly is that the love that can come from it. And I hope to, use whatever I've learned to spread a lot more love in the future.
David, I believe that you've won this race not only because you're a talented, knowledgeable, experienced athlete, but you have so much karma coming your way from all the love and the encouragement you've given the rest of us that it's just inevitable that this was going to be your day, because that came flooding at you all at once and you were lifted up on that trail and carried to the finish from that karma.
I'm not sure about karma, but I did feel everybody. I felt everyone that's emailed over time, everyone that's commented, everyone that's listened to our podcast, all these people that have just been, they're probably like, oh, David doesn't remember me. I felt every single one of those out there. And God, I'm getting emotional too much this week. I'm not like this. But, to me, that is everything. It's what makes this sport special. It's not races. It's not finishing. It's not anything like that. It's not training even. It's that we're all feeling the same thing. And, understanding that there were all these people out there who have been there for me and bet on me and believed in me for decades before this day. And I'm talking tens of thousands of people, like tons of the listeners of this podcast. It's like, oh my God, something out there made it feel like I had rockets on my feet. And I think it was that, that energy from them, of all those people tracking, of all those people who knew about it, that makes anything possible. So, not just a team achievement of the people that were with me, but a community achievement, hopefully. And I hope people feel that like, if we're in it together, sometimes we can do great things together.
Good deal.
I love it.
Do you have your third question yet, Don?
No. I asked 4. I asked 4, Scott. What are you keeping track? I had 4 of them. I think I went one over.
David, thank you for sharing this. When we heard about the huge success you had, we thought we need to get David on, and thank you for answering the email and spending. I know you're being recruited by everybody, including the New York Times, to tell your story. If you want to hear more about David's story, more race specific things, listen to their podcast. Megan and David do a podcast called Some Work All Play. You can also find them on swaprunning.com, where they have a lot more information there, David. And I have to say thank you, because during the podcast, I had this flashback of two-a-days and how as a 15-year-old kid going out for high school football, I didn't even know what 2 days were. And I came home after the first day and cried. And I told my dad I'm quitting, and he said, you can't quit. And I went back, and I that was an amazing experience. So I had that flashback. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh man, we all do. I remember drinking out of a trough. You remember that? It was a journey. I can't believe what they did to us.
Water was for sissies. Waters was for sissies.
Oh yeah.
That's the generation I grew up on. The coach said, you don't need water. Get back out there, War.
Same. That didn't come till later.
Rub some dirt on it. And get back out there, kid.
Yeah, no, but I love you, Don and Scott. Like, you've been there for me for everything. I love Trail Runner Nation. What a cool community you've built. You've laid the groundwork for what we've done in the world. I talked about standing on the shoulders of giants with Matt Carpenter. It's like, well, why do we have a podcast? In trail running, we have Trail Runner Nation to thank for that, right? So that is seen every single day, and we owe you guys a lot in ways big and small. So smallest thing I could ever do is be a guest on your podcast and talk about taking a merry journey down a hallucinogenic road in ultras. So I hope people enjoyed that trip into my tie-dye pain cave.
Scott, I've heard good raps before. I'm not going to talk over that one. That was good.
All we need to say is go out and run.
Mas.